I'll be honest, there were a lot of times when I wanted to be just like the kids from like Columbine. You're kind of young, so you may not have heard about that, but like those two kids killed.
I've heard
Yeah,
of the Columbine shooting.
yeah. I mean, they killed a bunch of people. I mean, and that went through my mind a bunch of times. And was it my upbringing that stopped me from doing that? Could be. I don't want to take a huge moral stance and say I'm immune to feeling those things, but I didn't do that. Um, Bullying is still probably an issue here, though. Hello, greater YouTube area and the surrounding internet regions. This is Killer Cardinal DA7. Before anyone starts in with interpretations, allow me to clarify something right up front. The two teens responsible for the shooting at Columbine High School in Colorado on April 20th, 1999, the two teens who took the lives of 13 people as well as themselves, Dylan Klebold and Eric Harris, I've never looked up to them. They were never icons or heroes to me. I never aspired to be them. It was never a goal of mine to be them. What I meant in the opening clip was, when I was in high school before the Columbine shooting, due to being bullied so frequently, I often had violent thoughts and fantasies. By the time I reached college and the incident actually happened, it caused me to look back at my time in high school, and I realized that had I not turned to things like writing and being creative and playing video games, I might have been so repressed that I could have turned into those two kids who shut up their school. Thankfully, I had those outlets for my feelings. They afforded me better control and a comfortable escape when I needed it, and thus I managed to keep from killing anyone in the real world.
I guess that's why I turned to art,
Yeah.
because it's something I'm really comfortable with.
Well, it gives you control. It allows you to kind of form a little world for yourself. I did a lot of writing a long time too.
Yeah, writing. I also love writing. I have so many worlds and so many stories I don't even know what to do.
Even though next year we'll see the 20-year anniversary of Columbine, apparently we've developed a bullying problem in America. Well, that's sure news to me. I feel like it's mostly been conservative people who have been bringing this up a lot lately, though. Calling the survivors of the Parkland, Florida school shooting from back in February bullies, trying to assign blame for the 17 lives lost to Emma Gonzalez and David Hogg and their friends. In the short clip I provided in the description that shows Emma Gonzalez speaking, she implies Nicholas Cruz, the shooter who was taken into custody, was ostracized for a reason, saying, quote, "You didn't know him." People saw her speech and wanted to leap on her for admitting to bullying him, but I saw a lot more fear in her than dominance. Cruz's social media presence was full of instances of violent threats. He supposedly had a stockpile of guns at home. His family life was extremely troubled, and other kids he went to school with were allegedly convinced that he was going to be a mass murderer. Maybe Cruz was known for acting out and other kids stayed away from him because of that behavior. Were those kids justified then in exacerbating his issues until he became what they were convinced he'd be? Not entirely, but if Cruz was violent or made threats or mistreated others to the point of alienating himself, it might be easier to see why he was ostracized. No one deserves to be bullied, but if other kids were legitimately scared of him, that's an entirely different story. In any case, we do have a bullying problem in America. However, given the majority of the times conservative-minded folks endorse kids fighting back themselves, as opposed to administrators coddling them in safe spaces, it tells me that conservatives may be concerned with bullying now because it's a convenient diversion away from any type of gun legislation, and not because they genuinely care about preventing people from being abused or mistreated. Maybe that's not true. Maybe conservatives do really care. But even if it is true, that's not to say it can't change. I believe we can all make improvements to ourselves and expand our horizons so that we care about more people. However, that very outward lack of empathy on the part of many pro-gun advocates in America leads liberal-minded folks to want gun bans, kind of like what they have elsewhere in the world. So guns are illegal in Australia, huh?
Yeah, guns are illegal. Only police can carry them, and that's rare.
In the interest of possibly finding other solutions than bans, here's something to consider. Every single one of us at one time has bullied someone. And if it's not every single one of us, it's certainly most of us. You don't have to admit to your wrongdoings, but if it helps, I'll start. My family moved when I was in 4th grade, and I was picked on a ton in both my old and new schools. I was usually nudged aside by administrators when I complained, but even though I was low on the popularity totem pole, there were still moments when I picked on other people. I was in gym class this one time in my new school, and these two sisters were laughing at me. I yelled at them. I called one of them a, quote, big fat hairy butt, unquote. Worth mentioning that she was neither big nor fat, not that it would have been justified had she been. It was just the first thing I could think of to snap back with, and the sister I called that began crying. If I remember right, the principal was called into the classroom. I think I tried lying about it, and I don't remember if I got in trouble, but I was at least scolded and embarrassed in front of the entire class, most of whom picked on me. And I admit to this not because I want pity or because I deserve justice for being mistreated by the other kids or school administrators or simply fighting back. I admit to this because I want to set a good example of taking responsibility for bad things that I've done. I don't feel good about doing that, even at the time I didn't, and I'm lucky it didn't lead to harsher punishment. But all that said, I've learned my lesson. Others, however, haven't. They insist on calling bullying a problem while then trying to bully kids who survived a mass shooting. They share memes calling those kids crisis actors, even after PolitiFact and probably other sites have since debunked that. People call David and Emma mini Hitler and little Fidel because they think that when those two fight for gun legislation, they equate to dictators. Because that's the best way to defend freedom. Hypocrisy becomes justified. It's self-defense. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. You want some scary thoughts? Strap in.
Think that we have an association that deals with the crackdowning on guns nationwide. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I feel like the NRA here in America is almost the opposite of that. Like they want more and more people to be armed, and you know, I get why. Like they view it as kind of a like an expression of like personal freedom, of, you know, self-defense and so forth. But like when so many people are getting hurt, I mean, I feel like more should probably be done. Imagine for a moment if those kids pushing for gun control were older, mid to late 20s, early to late 30s, maybe older than that, and they were scared of violence. The NRA and other pro-gun advocates could just say, what's the issue? Just get a gun. A gun will help you feel safer. Honestly, I might even agree with that if they were adults. But bullied kids have been looking to guns to exact revenge on people for a really long time now, and the Parkland school shooting is pretty clear-cut evidence that not enough has been done to stop it. I understand if a kid pulls out a gun and starts shooting, something extreme needs to be done to keep innocent people safe. We can try to play the non-violence card, but at that point it won't work. Okay. But that seems to be the only solution being fielded, that other people need more guns to shoot back to kill the threat when a kid starts shooting, and frankly, it doesn't make a lick of sense to me to only tackle the problem when bullets start flying, and not make more attempts to head off these problems before guns are even considered. One way to address this problem comes from Colion Noir, an unofficial spokesperson for the NRA who was on the Joe Rogan Experience recently. I put a link in the description to the full episode. When they were discussing the problem of school shootings, Colion brought up the prospect of getting rid of gun-free zones. Now, I've heard this suggested by other pro-gun advocates, and truthfully, just saying that alone is rather scary, as it doesn't define who is allowed to have guns in that zone and who isn't. It just kind of implies everyone can have one, and safety is just up to the individuals. However, despite my disagreements with Colion's claims on his YouTube channel, which I'll discuss more in the future, his appearance on Joe Rogan's podcast saw him clarify this idea by saying that schools either needed to get rid of gun-free zones or install physical preventative measures beyond just a handy sign that says gun-free zone to enforce that, like metal detectors and or armed guards. I don't personally love either idea, but if they would help keep kids safe, I'm willing to make the concession and support those things. Kids are vulnerable. They could clearly use better protection. Now, if we did post one or more armed guards in schools in America, the next question would be, who do we get to do that? Some think it should be veterans in the military. That's not a bad idea on paper. Veterans occasionally have a hard time getting work in, say, offices after they're discharged. Plus, they tend to have the bravery and initiative to jump in when people are in trouble or dangers occurring, so protecting schools may be a good fit, but there are certainly fears.
I guess veterans that left the army.
That would be better.
Because no, I'm saying like one thing that would be bad is because like when you're in the army, you have a bunch of bad experiences, and like dealing with that.
You're saying you don't know if their mental state would be in a good spot.
Yeah.
Okay, it's fair. It's fair concern, certainly.
Like if they're going to wield a gun, they should go through proper like mental stability and like get help for their problems. Like talk to psychiatrists and like learn how to cope with the things that like they have difficulty with.
I realize questioning the mental health of veterans seems insensitive to what they've gone through, but I think it's at least a fair thing to be afraid of. Not every single veteran is prone to flashbacks or violence, depending on how much or little combat they saw when they served. Some may need little to no counseling, some may need more before they're approved to guard kids. After all, that veteran guard will be made fun of, berated, and harassed on a daily basis by certain students, and they may almost never defuse active shooters. Whether they're veterans or just concerned citizens who happen to be armed, we'd need those guards to be unflappable in terms of verbal or physical abuse, so they don't snap and cause harm to the students they're supposed to protect. So what parts of the gun debate stand out for you?
One thing that really stood out for me was giving teachers guns.
Yeah. Where do you stand on that?
No.
You don't want it?
It's just really, I guess for me it's really bad.
It certainly seems bad to me.
Like giving teachers who are actively around children, guns is the worst possible thing you could do.
I have been so fascinated lately with conservatives' sudden interest in this bullying problem America has, because if most of them are gun owners, pro-gun, NRA members, whatever, their answers almost always revolve around more guns, not stopping bullying, to the point where some of them say we need to give teachers the right to arm themselves in classrooms. Now, even though I think that's about as horrifying as armed guards, I'm willing to entertain the idea, but there's a pretty significant inconsistency that exists. See, some people claim the survivors of the Parkland, Florida school shooting can't legislate on guns because they're not experts in guns, and I imagine that claim is mostly right. However, those people who endorse granting teachers the right to carry guns in schools are apparently experts on teachers? I know a few teachers personally. Maybe those few I know don't represent every single educator in our country, as some teachers may want the right to carry a gun in the classroom, but I guarantee most do not want to. Most did not enter into the education profession with the mindset that they may have to kill a child, or that killing children would be a common occurrence. In fact, I'd be willing to bet it's the opposite, that most people who become teachers entered into that profession to stimulate the minds of children so that the kids they teach don't want to kill people. Thus, if most teachers don't want to carry a weapon, how much progress towards safety is pushing for that right really going to make?
One reason why I don't really like teachers, because they might get angry, have a breakdown, and use the gun on their students, or the children might find it.
Oh yeah, they could get it. There's not even an issue that they can't get it.
Yeah.
Like, what happens when that teacher's back is turned?
Yeah, it's just, that's super unsafe.
Yeah. I mean, the idea of pushing for that right for a lot of people is that they get weapons training, but I mean there's no way to tell if that would be enough. I'm willing to entertain the idea of giving teachers a right to carry a gun in the classroom, but answer this question. If that's your best solution, that to protect students we need to give teachers the right to carry a gun, and a teacher happens to choose to not carry a gun in the classroom, and they get shot despite having that right, what is your first response going to be? Will it be something along the lines of, well, they should have had a gun? And then ask yourself some other questions, like if we passed a law to grant that right, how many teachers would actually go ahead and carry in the classroom? How many who do carry in school would actually be comfortable pulling that gun on a student and blowing their head off, even if that right were to come with training? Any pro-gun advocates feel like taking over when that teacher has to explain to one or more parents why their kid is dead instead of just immobilized or arrested? Are we going to assume those parents are going to be open-minded to what happened? Oh my gosh, we are so sorry our child put you through that. You were just defending yourself after all. Thank you so much for your service. I don't think so. Those parents are going to freak out. I don't know if they can or would sue, but they'll damn sure get on TV or websites and go public with what happened, because that's what people usually do when they have a problem these days. Arguing with then escalate, blame would get aimed in all possible directions, not a single person would take any responsibility in that kid losing their life or taking anyone else's. It doesn't matter how much self-defense the teacher was actually employing. The NRA would just wave it aside and say the same things they always say, and that teacher gets the luxury of living with the fact that they shot a kid. Superb.
I also have mental problems, so... Like, hearing about putting a gun in a person with mental problems hands scares me.
Only makes you more anxious.
Yeah.
Yeah. May I ask what you have? If that's too personal, don't feel compelled to, share.
No, it's alright. PTSD, anxiety, depression.
Gotcha. Yeah, none of those are easy to just, flick away.
Yeah.
Sure. The next time you adults are at your desk job, imagine your asshole boss in your office carrying a gun while walking around the halls. How would that make you feel, knowing he or she, as an authority figure, could pull that gun on you and end your life for doing something as commonplace as goofing off on Facebook or listening to some douche in a red vest and a hood yammer on about gun control? You're just sitting there, minding your own business. Bam! There they are, gun in your face. The mental and emotional impact on students who know their teacher has a gun reaches farther than people anticipate. The person who is supposed to be educating them in their youth, guiding them through the basics of mathematics and literature and science, these people would have a tool to instantly end their life if they act up. Or else some of those students would know that those teachers won't shoot them, and they'll push the envelope like kids almost always do, until we see teachers already pushed to the brink start really losing their minds.
So like I don't know if you ever heard of like teachers like going into full breakdowns.
Yeah, I don't know any specific details, but I'm sure that happens all the time.
Yeah, so where I live at, it happens like quite frequently, kind of.
Does it?
Yeah, because um, like teachers yell at their students and like they hold a personal vendetta against them.
Wow.
Like they do everything in their power to make sure they're failing.
Hmm.
And to put a gun in that person's hand would be terrifying.
Yeah. Yeah, there is a human element to teaching. I mean, they're not just robots. They have a position to fill, you know. The only way to stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. That's a quote by Executive Vice President of the NRA, Wayne LaPierre. It's a quote that's parroted all across America by pro-gun advocates, and many liberals who rally for gun control believe this quote is a complete myth. I disagree that it's a myth to an extent. There are unquestionably plenty of stories where an active shooter was stopped by someone else carrying a gun. In the description, I linked an article from the Washington Times that talks about a bunch of them. However, while I'm willing to see some truth in LaPierre's oft-repeated statement, there's an enormous problem attached to it, and that problem is simply owning or carrying or purchasing a gun does not make you a quote good guy with a gun. In my view, you need to earn that title. You don't just get a sticker for your shirt that says good guy with a gun free when you purchase one or more firearms. Granted, Joe Rogan pointed out on his podcast episode with Colion Noir that mass shootings have not been perpetrated by NRA members. That's a fair and interesting point that deserves to be made. NRA members may not advocate for non-violent means of reducing gun violence quite as much as I or others think they should, but if mass shootings aren't being perpetrated by NRA members, that says something about their dedication and discipline. However, the NRA is full of people who think they're good guys with guns, and many of them are only good guys with guns in their own minds. I'm sure there are some NRA members who have earned the right to call themselves that. Some. Maybe former veterans, former or current police officers, former or current firefighters, etc. But there are also a lot of people who haven't done a single thing to earn that title, good guy with a gun. Then, when people question them on it or don't trust them, they think it's completely unfair to get judged. Yeah, prejudgment is unfair in principle, but when the vast majority of them have done nothing to prove how, quote, good they actually are, I can understand the judgment a tiny bit. So many pro-gun advocates spend time and effort and energy raising their voices about their rights to own all manner of guns with absolutely no restrictions coming up in the discussion whatsoever. They spend no energy on having patience during arguments. They commit just as many social media attacks on liberals as liberals commit on them. Many don't volunteer in communities or watch out for people who are too afraid to own guns. What part of any of that is supposed to look good to other people? I mean, those folks call the kids that participated in the recent March for Our Lives, quote, Tide Pod eaters who need to grow up, instead of doing anything to earn the right to be viewed differently. Calling kids names doesn't make you look like a good guy. I don't care what kind of guns you own. Don't get me wrong, this isn't me pledging allegiance to the anti-gun resistance front. I'm just reiterating that even if their view of gun owners is misinformed, attacking back in immature ways is fueling their fire. It's not extinguishing it.
You can't just keep saying, oh, but it's in our constitution. You should. Change is always, well, it's not always a bad thing. Change can be good.
Yeah, I mean, especially if we, the more people you kind of bring into the conversation, the more insights you have, the better ability you have to compromise and to find something that suits everybody as opposed to just some people. While we're putting some focus on the physical preventative measures to stem school shootings, how about we also concern ourselves with treatment like verbal abuse, mental abuse, emotional abuse, treatment that can fester and boil in a kid's mind and heart and can lead to physical violence down the road. Conservatives and the NRA say we need more guns out there, but that's not entirely surprising given that these are also some of the same people who endorse spanking children. Inflicting pain apparently works brilliantly as a discipline method. You ask plenty of pro-gun folks and they'll tell you those marching kids could use a few good swipes with the old Switch, not the portable Nintendo game system, the flexible rod used for corporal punishment. Anyway, the reason spankings aren't a reliable method to stem violence is extremely simple. Pain eventually goes away. Many kids learn quickly that pain goes away and they develop a tolerance to it. That's not to say spankings and hitting kids can't work. I mean, it's helped some people keep in line as adults, but overall it tends to develop pretty passionate angers in people later on in their lives that's sometimes hard to put their finger on, and that misdirected anger can be dedicated to causes that aren't safe or sound. Of course, there's also the problem that instilling fear of authority in children by using violence kind of resembles the type of treatment those grown-ups don't want from government. Hitting kids is easier than actually teaching them why it's wrong to hurt other people outside of love thy neighbor. It's easier to hit them instead of explaining that you shouldn't be judgmental of other people simply because they're different. It's easier to hit them instead of guiding them toward a more accepting and tolerant path early in their development. Violence is constantly used by grown-ups whenever they need children to follow ancient rules and traditions because many of them blindly follow those rules and traditions themselves without any question. Those grown-ups are deathly afraid of authority inflicting violence on them and forcing them them to do things they don't want to do, while many of them do that very thing to their children. Well, I can't imagine why some children see violence as an answer. In case you're not making the connection, let me break it down for you. Do you find that in Australia, because there's such restrictions on guns for citizens, that are they feeling like they're defenseless? Like are they like really upset that they can't have weapons?
Well, I know quite a few. Well, some of my friends are protesting that they should be allowed to carry firearms like America.
Mhm.
And there's also some people that obviously don't want firearms because they think it cause harm. But it all depends on how you use guns. Like, they're not always violent in a way.
Yeah, sure.
Like, so on the spectrum, I'm sort of in the middle, so I don't know. But in my opinion, I guess to some extent firearms should be allowed.
Mhm.
So I find it-
But with regulation and responsibility.
Yes, very much.
The NRA promotes this sentiment to the public. We as American citizens have a right to defend ourselves from all threats. The Second Amendment guarantees it. They work hard to make leftists, liberals, and anyone not perpetuating a particular conservative mindset look like they are the enemy. And unfortunately, social media interactions with many liberal left-wing people can often play right into those presumptions, as many of those liberal left-wing people either take overcompensating militant stances or simply antagonize the crap out of conservatives, which, as I said earlier, going the opposite direction, fuels the fire, doesn't put it out. And the NRA spreads the message about these enemies by being more connected and available to see than ever before, through social media, NRA TV, conventions, etc. Bullied kids then think, well shit, I'm being threatened, I'm in danger, I have a right to defend myself. I'm gonna go get some guns, that'll show them. And they successfully get those guns, which pretty much all of us should endorse stopping at all costs, yet some people don't say anything about stopping teenagers from getting guns legally. The kid shoots one or more people in a school, average citizens then feel like they're in danger, which then causes the NRA right on cue to say, hey, calm down, it's okay, we have your back. Say, you feel unsafe, don't you? Yeah, you know what would make you feel safer? Guns. The NRA may not be directly responsible for gun violence. NRA members aren't running around blowing away innocent people. Some have even helped others keep safe. I will absolutely give credit where it's due. In fact, I'll even go so far as to say there may be a disparity between what NRA members themselves have the capacity to feel about their fellow citizens and the people in charge of the NRA promote to maintain its membership and support, whether financial or verbal. Despite what their marketing tells you, the NRA, at least those in charge, are doing less than jack shit to help any violence really diminish. Arming more people only helps them move more units and make more money. It doesn't address the reasons why people feel they need guns in the first place.
I remember, I think it was a few weeks ago or a month ago. I think it was in what is it? New South Wales, the state right next to mine. They built like the Sydney police station. Sydney is a city in Australia.
Right.
And the Sydney Police Department did a citywide crackdown on guns because there recently they found like a few biker chapters that were illegally importing guns from like a slur of countries like Russia, America, China, and they collected all the guns and then nationwide they broadcasted that they would destroy them.
Oh. I'm tempted to say Philip Morris is more responsible with the cigarettes they sell by placing useless cancer warning labels on packs and cartons. And no, before you even snicker and say it, oh, so you want warning labels on guns? No warning labels on guns. No one reads the ones on cigarette packs, or at least no one takes them seriously. No one will read them on the side of a gun either. But when useless warning labels are still more responsible than basically anything the NRA does to help violence be reduced to any significant degree, and I'm not talking about safety tutorials either, things that reduce accidental deaths due to guns being mishandled. I'm talking about doing things that reduce the need for good guys with guns. If I'm wrong, please let me know what the NRA does to directly help reduce violence. I'm all ears. I'll gladly give them the credit they deserve. As Americans, we can discuss whether gun bans or free and clear rights to own any and all guns ever made is better or worse. Ultimately, if we want to stem shootings, gun bans in America could help, but they also won't likely eliminate violence. If we want to eliminate or reduce violence, we probably have to take more roundabout routes. You mentioned that that the government had instituted programs where you are to combat bullying. Like what kind of programs did they institute? I'm curious.
They weren't really implemented in my state, but from friends in other states, like friends, they've said that like these programs would try to, so they'd have teachers or like social workers come into the school, and any known bullies would be sent into a program.
Okay.
Like they'd be taken out of class, and some of them I think got psychologists, like you know what I'm talking about.
That's good.
Not like serious psychologists, but like just to try to convince them to like promote that bullying is not the option. In a way.
Yeah.
It's not like 100% success rate, but it's pretty high up there on success rate.
Yeah, it at least helps reduce it.
Yeah. Some of my friends, well, I wasn't friends with them when they were bullies, but they admitted that they used to be bullies and they've changed. They're pretty nice people these days. So.
That's good. I mean, it doesn't sound like it's a punitive thing. Like they're not sent into like here, if someone was bullied, like the bully would probably get like suspended or punished or put into detention. But with what you're saying, it kind of sounds more like it's trying to tackle the whys instead of just saying, oh, you did something wrong, here, you're punished now.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, it sounds pretty good. I'd be all for doing that here. For not only people in school, but just adults too. I'll tell you what. If the NRA really wants to change its image, you know who they should emulate? Planned Parenthood. Nah, hear me out. This is a bit of a sidebar, but in both the gun issue and abortion issue, people feel that lives are at stake, so this is relevant. Watch this. See, plenty of conservatives and probably some NRA members believe Planned Parenthood is nothing more than a factory of baby death and fetal violence, right? That's the main reason they want Planned Parenthood shut down so badly, because it's just an assembly line of forceps and scissors and vacuums and chemicals and dissecting fetuses for parts and exterminating lives. But Planned Parenthood also provides things like contraceptives, things that can prevent pregnancy from happening at all and thus prevent abortion from being needed to even consider. That's why it's called Planned Parenthood, because preferably the best parenthoods are the ones that are anticipated and prepared for adequately. Now, even if you say contraceptives aren't 100% guaranteed effective, if contraceptives were more readily available, even more than they already are, the need for abortions goes down because, if my math is right, more pregnancies are prevented because more people who would be having unprotected sex are wrapping up or using IUDs or whatever else to block some of the fluid exchange. Unfortunately, when discussing abortion, staunch conservatives aren't willing to make that concession. They'd rather just blame Planned Parenthood for baby murder, and if it gets shut down, well, that takes care of the easier access to contraceptives at the same time. When trying to get an organization defunded and or shut down, it's easier to take the moral high ground by calling it all baby murder than it is for people with rigid religious values who supposedly support freedom for all to say, well, I'm a Christian, but people should be allowed to fornicate as much as they want. If they're going to fornicate, let them have condoms. Nah. It's better to tell kids that God wants you to repress every one of those impulses, because if you don't, you'll go to hell. And then, when those kids are busy feeling ashamed at being horny, something that's entirely natural, they sneak off, they fornicate, because apparently today is sound like a 90-year-old day, and when they're unprepared for how amazing it feels, young girls get pregnant. Something young boys don't have to deal with because it's not their bodies, but that's a whole other discussion. And all the zealously religious adults around those young girls either exile them for acting blasphemous, or they say, well, looks like you're gonna be a mom. You're a complete disgrace to the family, but at least we as a species are being fruitful and multiplying like the good Lord intended, so maybe he'll forgive you. Fingers crossed. It's as if Planned Parenthood offers other features like contraceptives and birth control, because while they do offer abortion as an option, maybe they don't view it as the best, most amazingly perfect option. They offer other things that can help abortion not even be an issue. You get what I'm saying? One of the things they're well known for has alternatives to prevent it from being needed. Conservatives want to say we have a bullying problem. I completely agree. In fact, I'd love for conservatives and or the NRA to actually do something significant and direct to help stop or prevent or reduce bullying, abuse, mistreatment, etc. That doesn't involve waving it aside by telling people to man up or learn to fight, or worse, waiting around until violence ensues to actually do anything. Wouldn't it be great if the NRA did that with guns? Offering services and features and programs and facilities and initiatives to deal with issues in society that aren't directly related to guns or don't encourage the need for or dependence on guns, so that the thing the NRA is most well known for isn't the only thing they deal in? That'd be nice. Like I said, if they already do that, please let me know in the comments. I'll be happy to give them adequate credit where it's due. Yeah, the NRA and Planned Parenthood. Told you these thoughts were scary. This is Killer Cardinal DA7 reminding you to use your head, be nice to each other, and take the time to think. Talk to you later. Take a look and just, share it around when you can.
Alright. Thanks.
Alright, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
See ya.
See ya.
Sure.
Alright.
Sounds like a plan.
Alright, great. Alright, thanks very much for talking to me. I appreciate it.
No problem.
Take it easy.